I want to thank the grace of heaven and the virtues of the masters, the predecessors and transmitting masters for having this opportunity to talk about the essence of Confucianism. This is actually, I don't think I'm qualified to talk about this, but because I haven't really read all of the Confucius' works, but so give it a shot. This is actually very difficult to try to talk about in 1 hour, to capture the essence, but we'll try. All right, so let's see. This thing doesn't work. Okay, but first, let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about a brief history of, yeah, you can say Chinese culture, but leading up to Confucius' time. Okay, so there's this historical background of Chinese culture, because Confucianism is really part of the Chinese culture, the tradition. So we talk about Chinese culture. It started supposedly. This is kind of mythological in terms of historical records, but it's kind of recorded in the Grand Historian. But all right, but that occurred like around 100 BC. So. But the time of the three sovereigns, okay, we talk about that. That's like in the lineage of Tao. We talk about those, but those are. There's no real. They haven't really found any like written records, historical records about these. These are almost like demigods, okay, right? But anyways, Fuxi, he's supposed to be the first kind of sovereign or emperor, but then these people are very, they're almost they're almost treated as being demigods, almost not really human, superhuman, okay. But anyways, you have these three, the three sovereigns, okay, the heavenly sovereign, the earthly sovereign, human sovereign, right? And then they did various things in terms of culture, like teaching about agriculture, how to build houses, clothing, all that. All right. So, So this is kind of some paintings, I guess, of the three sovereigns and then the five emperors. Okay. So these are very well revered. All right. So then you have the five emperors, so starting roughly 27. So the sovereigns is before this period, so it's roughly maybe 3000 BC, starting around that time. So you have the Yellow Emperor, Zhuan Xi, and then Emperor Ku, Emperor Yao, Emperor Sun, and then the start of the official dynasties, Xia Dynasty, is Emperor Yi the Great. Okay, so the ones in red, the last three, are considered like the three sage kings. Okay, because they're very virtuous, right?
Well, how they inherited the throne and then got passed by bloodline.
Right. Right. So the three of them, Yao, Sun, and Yi, they're very virtuous. They normally, right, the kings, they pass it on to their son, right, hereditary. But they chose the best person for the job, and so it's not necessarily their son.
It's like a democracy.
Yeah. So they're very virtuous. So that's what. But he tried to do that, but the people wanted his son to be the king. So he had no choice. But anyways.
Also, those three are the Chen Guan, Qi Guan, Shui Guan.
Yeah. These are three. I don't know what you call those.
Three posts.
Three posts. Heavenly. I don't know, heavenly posts or whatever. But so Emperor Yao, he was a descendant of the Yellow Emperor and the son of Emperor Ku. He became ruler at 20, died at 119. He actually devised the 356-day calendar for them. Okay, he encouraged morality, established a rudimentary government, and unselfishly selected a successor. Okay, so. So Yao selected Sun because he had heard of his filial piety, very filial, even towards the mother who was stepmother who was very bad towards him, right? Treated him very poorly, and so.
Also his stepbrother.
Yeah, stepbrothers too, and then.
His whole family.
Except for his father. I mean, his father. Well, initially didn't really understand, but until later.
He was abused.
Yeah. So, but Yao, he also, gave his two daughters to Sun to marry. All right. Yeah. So they shared the rule actually for 28 years, okay, together before Yao then let Sun take over. Okay. And so Sun, he was also descended from the Yellow Emperor. Yeah, a lot of these kings they claim descended as being descendants of the Yellow Emperor. He was also virtuous and benevolent. But during the time of Yao and Sun, okay, there was a lot of flooding. The Yellow River and all these areas that their settlements were. There was a lot of flooding, and they tried to control the floods, but had real difficulty. They weren't able to do it. They built dikes and things like that, but it wasn't enough. And so Sun, he appointed this official Yi, okay, to deal with the floods. And so Yi worked on it for over a decade, and he successfully controlled the floods. He built canals and dredged the waterways to channel the water away. And so he was very successful, and so he's called Yu the Great. So because he finally overcame the problem with the flooding.
Well, he succeeded his father.
He succeeded.
His father failed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but Yi was so dedicated to his duty, right, during the time that he was working on controlling the floods, that he supposedly passed his home 3 times during that time, and he never went into his home. And even though like his wife and children, they felt lonely, and they're wondering why the husband and wife, father never came home during that time. But he was so dedicated to his work, right? So eventually Sun made him a ruler too, the co-ruler for 17 years before eventually letting him rule by himself. Okay, so Emperor Rule took over. He was also wise and virtuous, and like I said earlier, he tried to pass the throne to someone else other than his son, but the people wanted his son to take the throne. So then that was the start of the Shah dynasty. So that's the official, you can say, the first official dynasty in China. All right. Okay. So, but Yao, Sun, and Yi, they are referred to by Confucius talks about them. So that's why we talk about them here, because basically they are the paragons of virtue. So that's why.
Yeah, but also during that time, that's where the rituals, the book of rites, book of history, and that was when it first started. I mean, it didn't become finished, but that's when they started. Because later on, during the Zhou dynasty, that's when they talk, mentioned those three efforts.
Okay, so then after the Shah dynasty, then we have the Song dynasty. King Wen, he's another one of the kings that Confucius talks about. Now he's kind of living at the end of that Song dynasty. He wasn't really part of the Song dynasty because at that time, you had these dynasties, but yet they have these little states, the chief dukedoms or whatever, and then so they kind of are almost autonomous rule over those, and then so you have various kings. So King Wen is one of them, but at the end of the Song dynasty, unfortunately, things started out well, but then, as with any of these dynasties, you have the rise and then you have the fall. And at the end, they become corrupt and all that, and so they deteriorate, and they eventually they get overthrown and replaced with a new dynasty. And so that's what happened. King Wen at that time, at the end of the Song dynasty, you have King Zhou. Okay, so he's a very evil. Well, he's like a tyrant, right? But there's some legend about that. I mean, we won't go to today, but he eventually he was really I guess he was bewitched by this dodgy this like a fox spirit or what is it called?
A fox, an evil fox spirit.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. But yeah, and so anyways, yeah, because things got so bad for the people that King Wen he wanted to get rid of this King Zhou, right? But King Wen, he couldn't, he didn't, he wasn't able to do it. Now King Wu, who's his son, was able to. There was a battle and eventually brought down King Zhou. Okay, King Zhou, I guess he committed suicide. But and that was the start of the Zhou dynasty.
That's also the time when they have stories of the.
Yeah, that's the Fengsun time. Yeah,
right.
that's the investiture gods, or
that's where those
yeah,
stories come from.
right, yeah. But yeah, so now also King Wen and King Wu, they had the, I guess you can say, there was this military strategist called Zhang Ziya. Okay, so he's very important in bringing down the Zhou king. Okay, because he's a strategist, and but anyways, all right. Let's see. Oh, now there's something. Zhang Ziya, he talked about, he gave some advice to King Wu, right? Says, one who is diligent in administering the country shows reverence toward heaven and rejects idleness and extravagance. His affairs will prosper. One who neglects duty and covets ease and enjoyment, his affairs will decline. One whose righteousness overcomes personal desire, his affairs will go smoothly and be successful. One whose selfish desires overcome moral principles, his affairs will be thwarted. All right, so, and he says, this is the simple, effective principle that can enable future generations to preserve the foundation of the country created by their ancestors. So he told, the king that if he rules with benevolence, then his dynasty will be measured by dozens of generations. And actually, yeah, the Zhou dynasty is one of the longest lasting dynasties, all right? Because King Wen or King Zhou, King Wu was very, they're very virtuous people, right? So King Wu, he was greatly inspired by hearing this advice, and so he actually ordered these words to be written on his everywhere, basically on his mirror, his wash basin, his staff, his sword, everywhere he can see, and so to remind himself. To use use those words to remind himself to be to encourage himself, right? So
What are the words?
no, that's what I was just saying earlier, right?
Okay.
So yeah, so King Wu, he was basically like a sage king as well. He was very humble and very respectful, right? And always sought the sage good advice from those who are wise and virtuous. All right, so basically, okay. Yeah, so right. So the Zhou dynasty lasted for almost 900 years, and so that's because they were all basically, and that's where the Book of Odes and stuff like that were written to record. They have all these proprieties, rituals to show respect, things like that.
Also, they also help write. I guess officially put down and write it the first time the I Ching.
Yeah, that's
The I Ching.
Yeah,
that's when they refer to Fuxi. See, so that's historically where Fuxi was referred to from there.
Right.
Because
it wasn't. They didn't really have historical language. Yeah.
But it was during that Zhou dynasty
that they talk about. Yeah.
They, he kind of collected, put down the official, the first, the first earliest known written recording about the
sovereign.
I Ching, and it mentioned Fuxi. So that's where Fuxi come from. You see what I'm trying to say? That's where the
How long? What is the length of time from Fuxi until that period? Time.
About maybe about 2,000 years. Yeah, about 2,000 years. Yeah. So King Wen, Fuxi, he developed it wasn't really the I Ching at the time, but it was the trigram. It was only the trigrams. It was only the trigrams.
Very important.
And then King Wen expanded it to the hexagrams that we know today. Right. So that's the later. Hoten. Yeah. It's a certain it has certain order and stuff like that.
But also during the Zhou dynasty, that's when they also recorded not just talk about Fuxi, but they also talked about the Yellow Emperor and Shenlong and all those people. So it came from that period. That's the earliest. And we know about Yellow Emperor, right? He supposedly discovered compass, right? Compass, and also
his wife supposedly did silk,
his empress, silk, and also supposedly is it Shenlong or Yellow Emperor? I forgot one of those two. They started recorded. They started drinking tea. So that's, it's recorded.
So before that time, there was no tea in existence.
No. We're
Well,
talking about. No. Tea already existed. The tea plant is native to China.
Oh, okay.
Not anywhere else in the world. Not India. Not Japan. Not Korea. Only in China. And supposedly, I forgot it was either Shenlong or Yellow Emperor. What are those two? Accidentally, some tea leaves dropped into the boiling pot of water, and then he drank it. Hey, pretty
good.
Yeah, supposedly.
Yeah, a lot of inventions or discoveries are like this, but yeah.
So when things had dropped into the boil, we just drink it.
See,
Yeah.
so so that's why we have, even though yes, Yellow Emperor and some of them did not, because those days they probably no writing. There's probably no writing. There's probably hieroglyphics, but no.
The language is not
codified
really.
writing.
It just around that time that Changjie.
Yeah, Changjie.
Oh yeah.
The writing.
Yeah, another
And we have the.
Wow, a lot of invention in that period.
Right.
That's where all the smart
okay.
people.
All right. So so it was during the Zhou dynasty that Confucius was born. Right. He's born towards the later part of Zhou dynasty, and at that time. Just before, so it was at the time of the spring and autumn period, right? That's the Eastern Zhou, and basically, it's the time of the 100 schools of, the quote, 100 schools of thought, which there are a lot of these philosophical schools appearing. So Confucius is one of them, Confucianism. And then right after that was the Warring States period. So basically, the Zhou dynasty kind of fell apart, and different small dukedoms or fiefdoms fighting amongst each other. And then Mencius, who's also very important in Confucianism, is during that Warring States period. But he's like 2 generations after Confucius. Right, about
80 plus years.
So, all right. And then, let's see. All right, let's go on. All right. So, and then right after that, then you have the Qin dynasty, which unified China.
Yeah, so that's what he called the first.
Yeah, he called himself the Qin
Sima. See, back then, we say the three sovereigns, 5 emperors. Yeah, they're called 5 emperors, but they're not really like a dynasty.
Yeah, it's different. Different from the way he used it.
Therefore, it's not an empire, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a real emperor.
Right.
That's what he proclaimed himself.
Yeah.
First emperor. That's the reason.
Right.
It's not that really he's the first
No,
emperor.
no, he's not. Yeah. But you can see that the Qing dynasty lasted only like 15 years.
Yeah,
very short.
30 years.
But he unified China. He started building the Great Wall. He standardized the units of measurement, things like that. The language as well. Language. Right.
The metric system.
Metric. Yeah. Measuring. Yeah. Right. But his rule is he's almost like a tyrant too.
Well, his rule is
he's detected. Yeah, the legal. That's one of the schools of thought is the legalism is based on laws that you govern the country, and strict laws.
Yeah.
And so, but you can see that it's very forceful, right? And so, you can see that based on the principle of what's soft and what's hard, his method is hard, and it didn't last long. Okay, because you don't win over the hearts of the people that way. Right. So you just force people.
You should also mention when Lao Tzu was born.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. Lao Tzu was just before Confucius.
So supposedly he was a
He's
Liberian. That's what they say.
Yeah,
he was a Liberian in one of the Zhou
right.
dynasties.
Yeah, it's probably it's just before. So it's still in the Eastern Zhou.
Even though they say he overlapped with Confucius, because Confucius
Right.
mentioned that he visited him.
Right.
But the oral tradition or whatever, the legend has said that really Lao Tzu was born like in the West early Zhou, so he lived like several hundred years. Supposedly that's the
right.
Whatever.
Right. Yeah. So supposedly, Confucius. Confucius obviously would have known about Lao Tzu and the Taoism. Okay, this philosophy. And so let's see. Let's go on here. All right. So then the Han Dynasty followed. The Han Dynasty is when you have the Confucian orthodoxy and the arrival of Buddhism. Okay, in the Han Dynasty. All right, so that's Buddhism. So Buddha actually is also born like a little bit after Confucius was born. So it's around this.
Yeah, really, but the Han Dynasty really, even though it says you have roughly 400 years, it's really 2 parts. There's a Western and Eastern. You know that? There's a
Oh.
Xi Han and Dong
Right.
Han. So Western Han started first,
Right.
then Eastern.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is just
Yeah, I know.
summary thing, but yeah. So Buddhism started coming into the country, spreading. It just started arriving in. This is before Bodhidharma, though. Bodhidharma came later. And then following that, we had the period of disunity, Six Dynasties period. That's when the Three Kingdoms, right? The Guan, the Three Kingdoms period. The Liang Dynasty is when Bodhidharma came. Okay, so that was during that period, and that's where Buddhism really starts spreading a lot more widely. And so, so in the following Sui Dynasty, China is reunified again. And then Tang Dynasty, you had really the flourishing of culture, and everything pretty much. And that's
arts, painting, calligraphy,
right,
poetry,
right.
Biba, it's all in that period.
And then
all those. Sudong and later. Sudong is Song Dynasty.
yeah, and then so that's the height of the Buddhist influence during that Tang Dynasty. So and then the Song Dynasty came after that. Now, so Confucianism. Now then you had the Orthodox Confucianism, but then starting in the Song Dynasty you have the Neo-Confucianism, which kind of you can say because of the influence of Buddhism and Taoism that they had to kind of feel they need to compete, right? So they incorporated some of their ideas into Confucianism. But really what we study today is kind of the Orthodox Confucianism, right? The classic one, right? Based on Confucius and Mencius mostly, right? Okay, so that's kind of the background. All right, so this is a Confucius painting. So this, of all that heaven has produced and earth nourishes, the greatest is man. Man's purpose is contained in our nature, right? So that's interesting. It's like talking about the Buddha nature, right? And then Mencius, okay, sincerity is the way to heaven. Okay, sincerity, Confucius, they talk about sincerity. It's not, we talk about sincerity, but it's more than what we think of as sincerity, all right? All right, let's see. Okay, so these are the kind of the canonical texts of Confucianism, right? So the five classics, right, in 4 books we hear about. 5 classics are before Confucius' time, okay, but Confucius, they use them, okay, they reference these. And Confucius may have edited or compiled some of those, but these came before. The book of poetry, all right. The book of history, the book of rites is an important one that, again, that mostly talks about the rituals, the proprieties in the Zhou dynasty, the early Zhou, all right? And so Confucius talks about, because at the time that he was living, the Zhou it's kind of like falling apart, deteriorating, and people weren't following these old rituals. And so he was trying to get the rulers to start following them again. All right, and then of course the 4 books: Great Learning, Doctrine and Mean, Alex of Confucius and Mencius. Right, so those are all very important studying Confucianism. All right, so now the Orthodox interpretation. So there, various interpretations, and Mencius has the Orthodox. So what he's talking about? So you see, when a child falls into the well, right? People, they feel alarm and distress, not because they want to get something out of it, right? Gain friendship or seek praise, but really it's because there is this, in here it says commiseration, but you can say it's more than sympathy, but it's really compassion, right? And that's the beginning of humanity. Right, the feeling of shame and dislike is the beginning of righteousness. The feeling of deference and compliance is the beginning of propriety, and the feeling of right and wrong is the beginning of wisdom. Right, and so the men have these 4 beginnings, just as they have their 4 limbs. Having these 4 beginnings, but saying that they cannot develop them is to destroy themselves. So this is kind of the root of our, you could say our virtues and cultivation. All right. So Mencius has this view that essentially. People are good-natured, okay? That the human nature is good, all right? So that's what Mencius' view. Xunzi,
based on what? The human nature?
Yeah, the true nature, the Buddha nature, really.
Not human nature.
Right. the Shrinza is kind of the opposite. He's saying that human nature is inherently bad, evil. But Confucius, so he's saying, human nature, well, it's really true nature is inherently good and benevolent, and that it suffers the influence. It's because of the influence, the environment, that determines the nurturing, that determines how a person becomes, what they become. Okay, so they can be negatively influenced by the environment, by teaching, whatever, society. And basically, all right, and so Stringa says he's inherently selfish. All right, that's the opposite view. But in Orthodox in Confucianism, so people they may today, pretty much everyone follows the Mencius' view. All right, but they all agree on that we need to have teaching, moral teaching, to guide one's cultivation, so that without teaching, having that proper nurturing or environment or person, they can be either good or bad. Okay, they can turn out to be good or bad. So teaching, education is very important, and Confucius, certainly advocate that. And okay, we require self-cultivation, and what they, Confucius talks about is through proprieties. Okay, through these rituals, these ceremonies that it's not just rituals and ceremonies, but like our manners. How we when we meet people, how we deal with people, right? In all situations, that's really how we cultivate. We do the proper thing. All right. Let's see. All right. So, but the Neo-Confucius, thought later on was influenced by Buddhism and Taoism. Become a little bit more metaphysical, add a little bit more things about afterlife and whatnot. All right. But that's not, the Confucius didn't rarely talk about those things. All right. Okay. So some misunderstandings perhaps in Confucianism. Some people may think it's like this oppressive system of hierarchy, right? Because he talks about this system, the 5 various relationships, right? And how you play your role. And a lot of you can say a lot of these East Asian governments, right? Nations, they're based on they're influenced by Confucianism a lot. Like Korea, Japan, Vietnam. But and people look at them and they say, well, these are supposedly the Confucianist societies, yet they can be oppressive. Okay, but really, there's this idea of mandate of heaven. Okay, where the king or the ruler has the mandate from heaven to rule. And so they use that to say, well, okay, so I can do whatever I want. I have this mandate. I'm going to rule any way I want. But that's kind of a misuse, because Confucius, he didn't, although they mention, the mandate of heaven, but all his teachings are about the ruler being benevolent, being, ruling properly. So it's not using, any means possible. All right, so that's a misunderstanding there. And so these are some quotes. He who wishes to secure the good of others has already secured his own. So we cannot. It's always trying to be unselfish, looking out for others. Do not worry about holding high position. Worry rather about playing your proper role. And a proper role is not. So it's not like trying to seize power for your own. Usually today, people who are seeking power are really looking for themselves. It's kind of selfish motivation. All right, it's not really for the others, for the people they're trying to rule over. And of course, there's that, the golden rule, right? What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others. Okay, and so all these not just apply to common people, but also the rulers. So, yeah. All right. All right. Okay, so another misunderstanding is that maybe Confucianism is pretty dogmatic, kind of like religion, dogmatic, right? Where you just have to take it on belief. But what he says about this is, learning without thought is labor lost. Thought without learning is perilous. You have to think. You can't just take what people tell you as fact and just believe it blindly. Okay, so you have to think for yourself. Use your wisdom. people may be made to follow a path of action, but they may not be made to understand it. So understanding, so even, like in religions, whatever, they just say, hey, this is it, this is the truth. You have to really understand it yourself, okay? Not just follow blindly. And so it says, it is the man that makes truth great, not truth that makes man great. So,
right, so it's not the dogma.
yeah, it's not the dogma. So it's a person who acts on what they learn and put it into action that makes a person great. It's not just the dogma itself, right? So we have to practice it. The superior man will watch over himself when he is alone. He examines his heart, and that there may be nothing wrong there, and that he may have no cause of dissatisfaction with himself, right? So it's a lot about self-reflection, this cultivation, the learning, this look within to try to correct oneself. So it's not just blindly following, all right? All right. So some people say maybe Confucius opposed progress. Yeah, because he was talking about going back, following the ways of the old, right? The old Zhou ways, but really, it's not really that.
Yeah, Confucius really should be considered. In this particular sense, you can say it's moral philosophy.
Yeah.
So he's talking about the past, is going back to the moral
right.
and ethical behavior and the proprieties, okay, of the past, because they were, very good, very, harmonious, all that
right.
stuff. Okay, so in that respect, he's saying, yeah, we're going back.
Right.
But he said nothing about. He didn't oppose to say, in terms of scientific progress or whatever.
Yeah.
He said nothing about that
right.
to oppose that. So
right.
that's okay.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Right. So yeah, it says. So our greatest glory is not in ever falling, but in rising every time we fall. So yeah, this is also talking about courage, but don't be afraid to try to do things, okay? And that we should always progress. And it doesn't matter how slowly we go as long as we don't stop, right? So always progressing. But it doesn't have to be very fast, but as long as we're progressing, right? And then he talks. Okay, so some other quotes.
That's like part of the sixth paradigm. Right?
Yeah, the Jing. Yeah, right. Yeah, so a lot of these, is very similar to Buddhism. In Buddhism, okay, these concepts. Perfecting oneself is the fundamental basis of all progress and moral development. All right, so progress. Also, he's talking about moral progress within ourselves, the person. Okay, not necessarily the outside, but we start from the inside. All right. Let's see. All right. Confucius rarely talk about like afterlife, spirits, things like that. But yet, there is. He does talk about obviously the rituals, right, of the past, the ancestor worship. It's actually not worship. He's talking about. It's reverence, okay, respect for the deceased. Now, and obviously, when you do that, then obviously there's the idea of the spirits that still exist. Okay, so it's not that he didn't believe in spirits at all, but his focus obviously is on the present life, what you can do in this life. Yeah, while you're alive. So it says, while you're not able to serve men, how can you serve spirits of the dead?
Right.
While you do not know life, how can you know about death? So
no point.
Yeah, what's the point of that? So you have to know how to live properly.
Right.
All right. So that's the important thing. Okay. So
that's where his focus is.
Yeah. So that's all his teachings are mostly about that. Yeah, it's not
focused on social.
Right.
Social interaction. That's like the 5 relationships.
Right.
8 virtues.
Right.
The 3 pillars or whatever. Way, right. 4.
Right.
Whatever,
Yeah. So we'll get to that. All right. So in these concept, there's this thing, very important concept of essence and function, and manifestation. Right. So. For example, the essence being energy is an essence, and then the force is a function, and then the manifestation of that is power or work that's performed. Okay, so just like you have potential and volition, and then you have an action and deed. Right, so we look at like our true nature, and then the principles of those true nature, and then the manifestation is the practice of it. All right, so just like the conscience. And the humanity being the principles of humanity, and then the reciprocity. So that's the last one is primarily talking about this Confucianism. So Confucius says, or in the doctrine of the mean, right? It says what heaven confers is called nature. Accordance with this nature is called the way. Cultivating the way is called education or practice. Okay, so that essentially follows this, and we'll talk about these things. All right. And, okay, so the essence of Confucianism. Now he talks about this Junzi, this superior, I guess we translate it as a superior person. He's like almost like a sage type of person, very virtuous, whose quality is ren, which is, you can say benevolence. Benevolence is too narrow for this ren, though, but it's like, I would call it like the virtue of humanity, what true humanity is, okay, the meaning of being a human, right? And then from that, you can say the practice is the reciprocity, zongsu. Okay, so the practice of humanity. So it's how we treat people, and it's basically reciprocity is kind of like two-way, right? It's how you treat people and then how others treat you. Okay, so you see that in the way the five relationships, it's not one way. The relationships are not one way. All right. So it's not like in filial piety, right? The child is performs filial duty to his parents, but the parents, it doesn't mean the parents can do whatever they want, right? They also love the children, treat them kindly, kindly, things like that, right? So and then all right. So other important concepts is sincerity. All right. That talk about true sincerity in Confucianism. Talks about courage. Talks about respect. Right? And then the five constants, 8 virtues that we always talk about. Right? Okay, so about the superior person. So these are all like, I guess, quotes from Confucius. So he says, okay, so I already mentioned that first one, but so in talking about this, what this Junzi is like, the great man is he who does not lose his child heart, the original good heart with which every man is born. So that's like that original heart, that true nature that we're talking about in Buddhism, right? So it's the same thing, that we don't lose that childlike innocence and purity of that true nature. What the superior man seeks is in himself. What the petty man seeks is in others, right? That spirit, the petty man. So that's the common person. What they seek is, they see with their eyes. They see all the things out there. They see what other people have. They want it, right? They see, etc. Right? So that's what a common person. But the superior man doesn't look at all those. He looks within. So self-reflection is very important. So this is the same as in Buddhism, right? The self-reflection is very important. We look within. We don't look at the material things out there. Look what others have, and I want, that drive people's desires. No, we look within, try to seek, you can say, perfection of our own humanity, of our own virtues. Right? That's more important, right, for Junzi. All right, let's see, next. All right, so the superior man does not set his mind either for or against. He will follow what is right. So now this is also like what we talk about in the Buddhist concepts too. It's just the middle way, the Zongyong. So that's really, it's interesting. They're all the same. And so it's not, you don't fall into this duality, this dialectic of what's right and wrong. Just follow what's proper, what you could say is proper. Okay. And then the superior man is also modest in speech, but exceeds in his actions. So they don't necessarily talk much, but they do. Okay. So a lot of people who do, they don't talk. I mean, who talk, they don't do. Right. So, but basically, we act. Right. The superior man acts before he speaks, and afterward he speaks according to his actions. So again, the action is more important than talking about it. And let's see. The superior man always thinks of virtue, whereas the common man thinks of comfort. The everyday things that for their own comfort. But virtue is more important for the superior man, right? Also, the superior man will watch over himself when he's alone. He examines his heart, and there may be nothing wrong there, and that he may have no cause for dissatisfaction with himself. So, again, self-reflection is very important. Just like in Buddhism, we talk about self-reflection, or in our cultivation, we talk about self-reflection. It's so important. We have to be aware, mindful of ourselves, of what we're doing, what we're thinking, what we're saying. Okay, so that's again, so there's very much a lot of parallels with Buddhism. Yeah, and so and he Confucius came before Buddha, so so these are before Buddhism came about. All right, so yeah, and it says the wheel of fortune turns round incessantly, and who can say for himself that I shall today be the uppermost, right? So who can, people claim, oh yeah, you get your power or whatever, but it doesn't last, right? You have no control over that ultimately, right? That there are things that beyond your control, fate or whatever, right? Okay.
For mindfulness.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Okay. And then talking about kind of governance, right? It says don't worry about holding a high position. Worry about playing your proper role. Okay. So again, for rulers, what's the proper role of a ruler, right? To rule over the country, to make sure that the people have, are satisfied. They're working. They're content. They're happy. Right. All these things that the nation can prosper. So that's the proper thing for a ruler. And so it says, if a country is well governed, poverty is something to be ashamed of. And a country badly governed, wealth is something to be ashamed of, right? So because, if you're well governed, but, there's poverty, then that means there's something wrong there, okay? But also, if there's a lot of wealth, but there's corruption and all that, all right, it's usually that wealth arises because of all these bad things, okay? So, again, a lot of his teachings are to these kings, to teach them to if you set a good example, a virtuous example, just like the ones from history, the previous kings, sage kings, very virtuous, then the people will respect and follow you, and they'll probably even give their lives for you. Okay, so that is the way to rule, all right, through benevolence. The strength of the nation derives from the integrity of the home. So again, this goes back to those relationships, that the home, the family is very important. Those relationships, how if you can govern the family well, have harmony and peace in the family, then that'll naturally spread through the entire society, all right? So to put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate a personal life. And then cultivate our personal life, we must first set our hearts straight. Right. Okay, so again, it comes back to that original, that true heart, that true nature. We have to start there. Everything starts there. So it's not about making laws and rules so that people will follow. We start with the education, teach them about their true nature, how we really, conduct ourselves in society. That's the proper way. That naturally everything will if people are upright and benevolent and virtuous, then and naturally, the family, the society as a whole will become that way, right? So we don't need necessarily the laws to make force that way. You can't use laws to change people's hearts, all right? So it's not possible for one to teach others who cannot teach his own family. So again, it starts from the family. Family is very important. So of the 5 relationships, 3 are in the family, right? So, all right. Okay, so in humanity and cultivation. Okay, so perfecting oneself is the fundamental basis of all progress and all moral development. All right. So mankind differs from the animals only by a little, and most people throw that away. Yeah, we say we're all humans, but do we really express that humanity, right? If we're killing, we're stealing, we're doing all these things, that's no different. You can say it's even worse than animals, right? Okay, so it's almost a very fine line, and yet that true humanity, that benevolence, is so great too if it's manifested, right? All right. So men's natures are alike. It is their habits that carry them far apart. Again, so we're all born the same. We all have that same true nature, that same conscience, but it's what we do with it. Okay. So if we're taught wrongly, then we take the wrong path. We develop bad habits. Then that's distinguishes. That's the only thing that distinguishes us. So it's what we do. you know, and so, obviously wisdom, all these things are very important. So think no vice so small that you may commit it, and no virtue so small that you may overlook it. Right. So every little thing is very important. Right. That it's like a little thing, it's no big deal, but again, that accumulates to become a habit. All right. So. And then so even little virtues like smiling, right? Buddha says about smiling, that's merit, right? It's virtue. That's those are good things. We should not overlook those, right? And then I have never seen a man who is fond of virtue as a woman. Okay, again, this is basically about looking at the outside things, all right? All right, let's see what else. All right. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves, right? So, it's like when you're seeking revenge, right? Everyone loses. Okay, you're gonna, whether or not one person dies or 2, it's the same thing, really. That's not the right path. Okay. When anger arises, think of the consequences. Okay. So again, self-control. Part of this cultivation is all self-control. Following the right way. All right. So never contract. Okay. So never contract friendship with a man that is not better than thyself. Now, some people look at this and say, "Well, that's kind of take it the wrong way." Basically, it's saying it doesn't. That does not mean that we shouldn't make friends with people below us or things like that. Okay. It means that we should learn from those who are virtuous and who are better than us or virtuous. So don't keep company those people who are bad influence, right? Things like that. So
because people criticize, oh, that's elitist.
Yeah,
that's
right,
cliquish.
right.
No, that's not the intent. That's not what he meant.
Yeah.
He's saying that it's just like in sports.
Yeah.
You always
Yeah, we
want to be better, right? So you always want to compete people
with
better than you,
right? That's how you improve, yeah.
Right? Because if you always play people
below, you're not going to improve, really.
Well, but you be somebody better than
Yeah.
you get destroyed, right? So it's the
But
same
you can
idea.
improve the ones weaker than us.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you can't improve yourself.
I know, but
Right.
you can still improve them too.
Actually, in the lab, there's someone is talking about this. We should befriend people who are virtuous. We also try to keep company with those people who has very good virtue.
Right.
However, we still should be benevolent to people who are not
Yeah, well,
so
that's
Yeah.
compassion.
maybe
Right.
immoral.
Right.
Try to help.
Yeah, try to help them change their ways, yeah.
Right.
So, okay. Here. So he speaks, yeah. He who speaks without modesty will find it difficult to make his words good. Okay, so obviously those who they talk a lot, but then they can't follow up with the action.
Walk the talk.
Yeah. And then it says, okay, right. Right. Don't just make progress. Don't stop. Don't go too far or too short. Again, kind of the middle way. Don't go to extremes. Right. Let's see. The more one man meditates upon good thoughts, the better will be his world and the world at large. So again, thinking, good thoughts. We tend to think we see people, we see the bad things, we think about those more than we think about good things. How we can make the world better. Really, so it really all starts from the thoughts. Okay, having those good thoughts, how we can make the world better. All right. Okay, so when we see men of contrary character, we should turn inwards and examine ourselves. Okay, it doesn't say to shun these people, but when we see bad characters, then we should reflect on ourselves to see that we don't do those things, that we correct ourselves, make ourselves better. Right? These are like a reminder to ourselves to not be like that. Right? And it says, a man who has committed a mistake and doesn't correct it is committing another mistake. Okay, so obviously if we make a mistake, now a lot of people, sometimes we make mistakes or we have maybe some faults or bad habits that we don't realize ourselves. And other people will point it out to us, and then we need to correct that. All right. Otherwise, every time we're just repeating the mistake. Okay. But actually, Yan Hui, he's this is saying, okay, you make a mistake once and then you don't want to repeat it. But Yan Hui is actually take a step further. It's like once you have that thought, right, and then you act on it, it's a second mistake. So the thought is the first mistake. So it's not having that thought initially, the bad thought. All right. So that's going back. That's even higher level. Okay. So
That's like the Buddha.
yeah.
Buddha.
Right. So that's yeah. And so it's better a diamond with a flaw than a pebble without. So make something of yourself. Even though we make mistakes, we were not perfect, but we try. We do. Try to achieve. When it's obvious that the goals cannot be reached, right? Don't adjust the goals, adjust the action steps. Again, when we set goals, we need to, and then we find out that we can't, let's say vegetarian, well, not vegetarian, because vegetarian you already have to start, but let's say, some, I don't know, you make some vow, right, that you want to do something, but you find that it's so difficult along the way, but we shouldn't say, oh, give up on that goal. We should adjust how we're going about it. Maybe we're going about it, there could be a better way to achieve that goal. Okay, so that's something, we don't give up on that goal. All right, so we'll take a break here. Yeah. All right, it says five things constitute perfect virtue, right? Gravity or seriousness, right? Solemnity, magnanimity, earnestness, sincerity, kindness. So I guess as part of our cultivation, so obviously some of these are kind of not in the standard virtues, but again, virtues. Well, I mean, to talk about perfect virtue, it's like you have to include all virtues, right, basically. Okay, so it's like easy to hate and it is difficult to love. Right. This is how the whole scheme of things works. All good things are difficult to achieve, and bad things are easy to get. Right. So you take the easy way to pursue all those things. That those are not usually when we have to practice our virtues. It's for most people it's difficult. I mean, it seems difficult. Right? It's easier to be lazy. It's easier to just do the whatever you want. It's not following your desires, all that. So that's also true. Okay. Yeah, so things that are done, it is needless to speak about. Things that are past, it is needless to blame. All right, what's done is done. But the most important thing is that we improve ourselves. So we know that something we did is bad in the past, and we need to correct ourselves and improve. Okay, so we don't just talk about the past. We have to then correct ourselves. Okay, for the better. Okay, so reciprocity is a very important concept. And basically, so here you see Zigong asks, right? Is there one word which may serve as the rule of practice for all one's life? The master says, is not reciprocity such a word, right? What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others, right? So that's where the golden rule comes from. So reciprocity, obviously, it's kind of this two-way thing, where how you treat others, others would treat you. Okay, so that's like the key concept here in the practice. So in anything we do, however we do it, we realize that this is you can say that this is a very this is one way to talk about karma, right? It's just like what goes around comes around, all these things. Okay. All right, so that's how we. But later on, you'll see that he doesn't mean that if someone treats you poorly, that you should treat the other person poorly. Okay, it's not like that. You still use benevolence. You still use compassion. All right. So to want a thing to live means, to love a thing means to want it to live. Okay, so that's how we should view things. Treat everything that way. Okay, and then the other one I talked about. Okay, forget injuries, right? Never forget kindness, and actually the second one is probably similar. Is probably this rephrasing of that. Recompense injury with justice, and recompense kindness with kindness. All right, so it doesn't say recompense injury with injury. Right? So it's not an eye for an eye. That you don't fight back or get revenge, right? It's just to have proper justice served, whatever that may be. And so, but always be kindness and never forget the kindness that we get, right? And also, if other people hurt us, we should forget about that. Let it go. Okay, so again, harbor the good, right, and forget the bad. All right, and then it says also, if a man takes no thought about what is distant, he will find sorrow near at hand. So basically, don't just be thinking about yourself and maybe your family. We have to, compassion should be beyond borders, beyond distance, right? So today, because in the society today, we kind of, because news travels all over the world, and then so we hear about things going on in other places, disasters, calamities, etc. And so, I mean, we a lot of people, they're very, charitable. They want to help. They have sympathy, compassion, and that's good. So we should think more broadly, okay, and look more broadly, not just about ourselves, our own lives, or our family lives, and broaden that circle to include everyone. All right. Okay, sincerity and faithfulness are the basis of every virtue, right? So sincerity, again, that is like very important. It's central to our character. That we have to be sincere and faithful to what? Our true self, our true nature, right? Our conscience. Okay, so that's really, but that's it goes beyond that actually. It's not just talking about that, right? So wherever you go with all your heart. So it's not just go, but whatever you're doing, right? Do with all your heart. True sincerity. That's all. That's also talking about sincerity. Okay, in what you do, and all right. When you're laboring for others, do it with the same zeal as it for yourself. So again, try not being selfish, not thinking of yourself only. So a lot of people, when they're doing things for themselves, they'll do very well. But then for doing it for other people, they may not do as good a job, right? Because it's not for themselves. But really, this we should be true to our true nature. And it says no matter what, we do it earnestly. Doesn't matter. That's our duty. All right. It is more shameful to distrust our friends than to be deceived by them. So, again, how we treat others. So even though, someone may, a friend may, lie to us or things like that, but, that is not as bad as if we start distrusting, our friends, distrusting others, right? Trust is also one of the key, virtues, if you will, qualities that we should have. So we should not really look at others and say, oh, this person is bad, so I don't trust, I don't have that trust anymore. But we should always try to maintain these virtues, no matter, whatever the condition. Courage also is important. He talks about courage. Our greatest glory is, okay, all right, we talked about that. Wisdom, compassion, and courage are the three universally recognized moral qualities of men. Okay. To see what is right and not to do it is want of courage, right? So when we see something that needs to be done, we have to have that courage to do it, to do what needs to be done. Okay. We should not say, "Oh no, I'm afraid." That's something, and especially as regards to our own self and our own behavior. We see that, I need to correct myself. We need to have that courage to do it, right? He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior, right? So really, the courage, not necessarily towards the outside, but towards ourself, towards conquering our own bad habits, faults, etc., to improve ourselves, right? When we have faults, don't fear to abandon them, right? So we should definitely try to, because things, they become habits, we need to get rid of the ones that we shouldn't have, right? Respect, respect yourself and others will respect you, okay? That's also, this reciprocity. Without feelings of respect, what is there to distinguish men from beasts, animals, right? So respect for others. That's something that, you can say, I don't know, some animals, they can show respect too, but we really need to show respect to others and that's what a human, should do. All right, wisdom. So by three methods, we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is noblest. Second, by imitation, which is easiest. And third, experience, which is the bitterest. All right, so he's saying, yeah, so through self-reflection, right, we gain wisdom. Right, it's not necessarily, we can't really, yeah, we can kind of read about others' wisdom in books and things like that, but really we have to self-reflect to get that wisdom. We can, if you just follow the advice of others, that's okay too, but that's not the best, right? And then of course, if we don't listen to the wise advice of others, and then we go do things anyways, and we learn the hard way, okay? So that's not the best way, all right? So again, self-reflection. The people may be followed path, okay, right, but they may not be made to understand it again. Wisdom is very important, so it's not just blindly follow things. Everything has beauty, but not everyone sees it. Again, using our wisdom to see the truth and beauty in everything. All right, it's not. Again, this is not. Having biases, having things like that, saying, "Oh, I don't like. I think this thing is ugly." That's again falling into that duality. This is kind of a more universal view. Life is simple, but we insist on making it complicated. Yeah, that's certainly true. Okay. All right. Learning. Yeah, he talks a lot about learning, of course. Learning, right? Without thought is labor lost. Thought without learning is perilous. Definitely have to know how to think and understand, reason. You cannot open a book without learning something. So there's something to be learned anywhere. Okay, not just a book. You meet anyone, right? You can learn from them. All right, even if they may be less educated, doesn't matter. You can learn from a baby, right? So that's something important. No matter how busy you are, right? You think you are, you must find time for reading or surrender yourself to self-chosen ignorance. So he definitely Confucius advocates learning. All right, and education is very important. And today, yeah, that's true. I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So what this means is, we may hear something, all right? Like in class, you hear about it, but you can forget. It's easy to forget. Now, but then if you see something, okay, you see something in action, then it's a little bit more memorable. But if you actually perform it, then so in other words, take what you've learned and then actually do it. Or, if someone's teaching you something and you get hands-on practice in doing something, then you really understand it. Okay, so that's something that's very important. So it's really the practice is very important, right? We don't just take knowledge as it is. We have to put it into practice, right? So that's one of the other thing it says. You put what we learned into practice. Does not matter how. Okay, so right, obviously we can progress slowly, but as long as we don't stop or go back. All right. Study the past if you define the future. Again, Confucius he referred a lot to the historical, the past, but we really need to learn from the past. If we don't learn from the past, we're going to make the same mistakes again in the future, right? Ignorance is the night of my. Okay, so again, a lot of things. All right, so here, if I am with two other men, they will be my teachers. I will pick the good points of one and imitate them, and the bad points of the other, I'll correct them in myself, right? It's not say, oh, I see something bad, and then I start, saying bad things about that person, right? So we self-reflect, correct ourselves, all right, when we see that. So again, we can learn from anyone, whether it's good points, bad points, we can learn. Having that kind of open mind. Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. That's also very important to be, we think we know a lot, but what we don't know is just as important that we know that, okay, that we don't know, okay? So that's, being humble, right? So that's how we can learn, right? Otherwise, we can't learn. Learn as though you would never be able to master it. Hold it as though you would be in fear of losing it. So again, cherish what we learn. right? And always be, have that mind to always constantly be learning, right? Don't think that, oh, I've learned enough and I'll stop here. There's no end to learning, okay? All right, so, and once we learn something, don't, waste it, okay? Right. So then, obviously the five constants is very important, and these are, yeah, we typically talk about them as the five constant virtues. Right. Again, sincerity. That sincerity is very important. Is in the center. Right. Sincerity. Sometimes, they translate that as, faith or faithfulness. Okay. Yeah, you can say it's kind of has all those meanings. All right. So, wisdom, benevolence, propriety, righteousness. All these virtues are nothing without sincerity, right? It just becomes, yeah, we kind of perform the motions. We say, oh, because on the surface, on the outside, you can be performing some charity, but if on the inside you're not sincere, then it doesn't really mean anything, okay? So, and it's the same for all of these things, all right? So that sincerity is really the foundation, the fundamental aspect of all these. Let's see. Okay, and then of course you have the eight virtues. Filial piety, again within the family, how children and parents, how they treat the parents, right? Brotherhood, how you treat kind of friends, siblings. There's loyalty, or you can say that's also faithfulness. So these, and you have like trust. Okay, so loyalty typically is between the subject and the ruler. Trust between friends. Propriety is anywhere, anyone. Doing what's proper manners, proper following the proper rituals. And then righteousness is kind of knowing truly what's right and wrong, the sense of justice, integrity, honesty, okay, and then that last one, sense of shame, or you can say having guilt or whatever, just knowing that you've done something wrong, that you need to correct yourself, okay. So those are eight virtues. All right, so basically, I'm going to try to summarize some of the things. Confucianism is not it's not a religion, okay. Some people say it's kind of religion, but it's not. It's not like a typical religion. So it doesn't really fall into that definition of a religion, because it's not really talking about God. They talk about heaven, but it's not really worshiping that, right? So it's not religion. It's not a spiritual practice. Not a spiritual practice either. Again, his focus is on how to create harmony and peace in society, right? How people should behave themselves while they're alive. Okay, it's not about thinking about the afterlife. All right, where you're going to go next, and it's not about worshiping your ancestors. Okay, it's showing reverence, respect. All right, emphasis is on so the proper moral and human conduct. The conscience, right, is the key thing. It's talking about we all have that conscience. It's part of our true nature, and from that conscience you can say the principles are the humanity. Okay, the principles of humanity, the and in practice that becomes reciprocity, right? The social, So basically, they advocate that through propriety, which is all doing the proper things, the rituals, proper manners, things like that, how we deal with people. That's how we create social order and harmony, right? And that's true. You can't create social order and harmony through technology. That doesn't do anything. Actually, Facebook, things like that, social media is actually making people more distant, further apart. They don't know how to interact with people anymore in person. Right? They just have these short little messages on Facebook. That's kind of even the sociologists today, psychologists today are saying that. It's kind of it's leading to a society that's, even though it's more connected, it's people are further apart, isolated. Yeah, and it can create.
Ironic, huh?
Yeah, it creates people. People also tend to be more. It's all about me. In that kind of context. It's like, oh, showing, this is what I've done, this is what, all my pictures, things like that. It's about me. It's more egoistic. All right. Confucius believed in you can break through the social barriers, class barriers through education. That anyone can get an education and they can go, it doesn't matter what you start as a farmer or a peasant or anything else. You can, if you educate yourself, you can become, a minister or anything, right? And so that's education is very important. Philosophy is very relevant today as a secular ethic and practice, right? So it's not, again, it's not religious. So today, especially today, yeah, you have all these religions already, and but being a more secular society, more materialistic society, Confucianism is something that anyone can adopt, right? This philosophy of life, and it's very relevant today. Especially today's kids, they get all the wrong influence, right? So remember, he said that they all have that true nature, but they influenced. They're learning the wrong things, and so that's why they become bad. So education, teach them right. And unfortunately, because of the materialist society, the parents are pursuing all these material things. They're spending less quality time with the children. And so the family, then you have dysfunctional families, and the kids, they grow up and, they follow the same ways, pursue all these material things again. So society then will deteriorate.
I was watching the news the other day. Even little babies, they're getting little iPads for them. Babies, not even 1 year old yet.
Yeah. So the meaning of life is to realize the truth. Okay, so that's the truth cannot be reduced to teachings and words. So yeah, even though teachings are self-reflection, right? Self-cultivation. That's really the key. So education is the first step, but then self-reflection, self-cultivation is a lifelong process. The truth is within each of us as the innate quality, ren, okay, benevolence or perfect virtue or the true humanity. We all have that. We just need to bring it out, express it, learn about it, and follow it. Okay. So of all that heaven has produced and earth nourishes, the greatest is man. Heaven's purpose is contained in man's nature. Right. All right. So yeah, we are between heaven and earth. And we are. Well, we have this conscience, this true nature, this humanity that distinguishes us from other living beings, from other animals, and we have to make the proper use of that. Okay. Well, yeah. So that's basically kind of a quick summary of try to capture Confucianism in a few slides and quotes. It's very difficult to do, but hopefully I captured most of it. And so you can see that Confucianism it's actually very practical. It's very practical in everyday life, especially today. And you don't have to believe in God. You don't have to believe in any of those things. Okay, that we can become better human beings, more virtuous, more moral. And that is really the same. You can say the same goal of in all the religions. The Buddhism and Taoism. It's also about self-cultivation. So it's just a question of whether they're emphasizing one thing or